Flapping around a little bit. Maybe.
You're live. It says I'm live. I don't know if I'm live. I feel not alive. Hello, TCI family. Special shout out to Wisconsin, to Justin. What's up, Justin? Hope you're doing great out there. Everybody here misses you. Can't wait to hear the great praise reports and news about what's going on with you in Wisconsin and how TCI is going to open up a church out there very soon. So let me know when you're ready. I'll be on a plane and out the door. Tonight's message is, you guys have heard the saying, it's lonely at the top. Well, then why don't you take someone with you? I learned that lesson from a man named Dr. John Maxwell. John's one of the leaders in the world. He's written only about 100 books on leadership. Last time I checked, like 8 or 9 of them were #1 bestsellers. But John, when he first said that, it kind of stuck in my head because it is lonely at the top. You know, when you're climbing success, you're like by yourself. You're the guy doing all the work. You're the guy handling everything. At the end of the day, it's only lonely if you choose to be. Jesse, could you turn that light on behind us back there? The interesting thing is when I was looking for a person to kind of talk about, right? I saw David, and David is a guy that's pretty interesting. He's an interesting fellow. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I would be picking up a study that we did in Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, leads me beside quiet waters. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. That scripture is the key in David's life. Now, David is not a Christian, by the way. He's a Jew. He's Jewish. And when he was just a little wee lad, everyone knows the story. It's we're talking about Goliath and David. But let's back up a little bit before Goliath and David. Because before Goliath and David, Saul, the current king of Israel, because prior to the kings, they had judges that oversaw everything. But the people said, we want a king, we want a king. So the Bible tells us that they anointed a man named Saul, who was very good looking, 6'3", dashing, a strong leader in the tribes, and everyone wanted to follow Saul. So Saul became the king, but Saul did a whole bunch of bad stuff. So he fell out of God's eye, if you will. And at the time, they had what they call a prophet. And Samuel was the prophet. And so Samuel was told by God to go anoint another king. And he went to a teenage boy. And his name was David. Now, let me ask you a question. If a person that you guys knew as our country's prophet came to you and said, you're going to be the next president of the United States. And you know that according to the laws back then, the prophets only spoke what God said, right? And it manifested itself. Would you be quiet or would you be like, yo, I'm next up in line. I'm the guy. Because I'll be honest with you, most people would be bragging about it left and right. They'd be like, I'm supposed to be the king. Why am I still shoveling the dew from all the, shepherding of all the cows and the sheep and all of that? That's a good question. But he stayed humble. And that's one of the keys in David's life is he remained humble. Now, what I want to do is interesting quote here, and it's from verse 4 of Psalms 23. It says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, that's the NIV version, and I like that. I've never heard it really that way before. I'm sure I've read it before, but I just don't remember that. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, David said, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Now, this is a kid who was a teenager who kept his father's flock, and he slew a bear and a lion, okay? He was by himself, and he did it. Then you flash forward, right? We go to 1 Samuel chapter 17, and that's the story of when he went to bring food to his brothers who were actually in the army. And he gets there, and it's this valley, and I've been there. It's this beautiful valley. Now at the very bottom is a road going right through. You can pull over and kind of throw a stone and be like, oh, that's where Goliath got hit, and that's where David threw it. And this little boy goes up there, and he's like, what is going on here? And you guys know the story. He ends up going, I'll kill this guy. If you guys ain't got the guts to do it, I'll do it. And he's this little boy. He wasn't afraid. He feared nothing. Now, Was he scared? Absolutely. The difference between being scared is a good thing. It's a sense that God put in every single person here, that when we were created, that sense of being scared tells me if I touch that burner, I'm scared I'm going to burn my hand. As a child, you stuck your finger in the socket, maybe. I don't know if you did or didn't. I don't know if I did. But if you did, you never did it again because you were scared. Like, yeah, if I stick my finger in that thing, it's going to shock me. I climb mountains for a living. I'll be honest with you. Anyone that knows me knows I am scared to death of falling.
Spiders.
Okay, and someone had to mention the spiders. This is true, but we're working on the spider thing. But I have a scared thing inside of me that goes off and tells me, be scared. It's time to be scared. There's a cliff. It's 4,000 feet down. What are you doing? Back away. Back away.
No, that's a spider.
That's not fear. That's being scared, and that's a trigger inside of us, and that's a good thing. But David wasn't fearful. He didn't fear anything. And what's interesting is in 1 Samuel 18, verses 6 through 16, Saul tried to kill David with a spear. So David became the right-hand guy of the king because he killed Goliath. He was the right-hand guy of the king. And the king got jealous one day because they were out killing the enemy. And on the way into the gates of Jerusalem, the women would sing. And they sang a song. It said, Saul has slain his thousands, but David has slain his tens of thousands. Whoa. Ego got involved. King's like, why am I'm the king. Only thousands and him tens of thousands? It was the facts. And his ego took over. Instead of him realizing he had an amazing tool at his disposal, an amazing fighter that could nothing feared. Why? Going back to verse 4 of Psalms 23. Even though I walk through the darkest valley of Goliath, and then flash forward. You could hear David rehearsing this in his head. Even though I slew the king's giant and I'm the right-hand guy and I've killed all these people that I was, to fight our enemies, he comes at me with a spear? You didn't fear it. And he didn't attack him either. He never attacked him. He just saved his life and others around him. And so what's interesting is Saul tried to kill him multiple times. Not like over a period of like 1 year, 2 years. For years, this went on. And so David, again, when you go down to 1 Samuel 18, 17 through 27, there's a different style of killing he tries. So David gets back in there and, King, why are you doing this? And Jonathan, the son, Dad, what are you doing? This is David. He fought Goliath for you. He did all this stuff. He killed all the Philistines. He did all these things. So why are you treating him like this? All right. I'm sorry. Forgive me, David. I can't believe I did all this. Okay. Then what he says is he goes, listen, if you'll kill 100 Philistines and cut off their foreskins and bring it to me in a bag, then I'll go ahead and let you marry my daughter. Well, David says, no problem. He goes off and kills 100 Philistines, clips their stuff, sticks it in the bag, comes on back. Saul was hoping he would die. The whole point was a guy against 100. How's that possible? David didn't fear anything. Did David think he's just not destructible? No. But again, going back to that verse, at that moment when he was facing 100 Philistines, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I could hear him repeating this over in his whole life. Now, when you get through that in 1 Samuel 19:24, King Saul tells his son Jonathan, who was David's best friend. David and Jonathan were the best friends. They were literally like this. Jonathan knew that David was going to be the next king. He even told him, I know I'm the prince and the heir to the throne, but we all know my dad messed up and God's chosen not to favor our house anymore, so it's going to be you. And he befriended him. How many princes that were going to be the next king would let that happen? The ego would get in the way and they'd kill him or try to kill him so that the next guy could take over and so on. But he didn't. David was smart. There was times when David was by himself, like going back to the shepherd days. Now, if you guys know anything about Israel and shepherds, they're pretty cool, actually. To this day, shepherds are still trained the same way. Now, yes, they have more mechanicalized stuff to deal with, but the actual training of a real shepherd in Israel still is done the same way. And they'll take a little rock and put it 10 feet from here. And the shepherd boy has to practice hitting that with a slingshot. And then after he can hit that pebble off with a pebble, he did 10 more feet, 10 more feet, 10 more feet. And they keep going back. And these guys are so good, they can and take those things out. You can put a Coke bottle all the way out there 100 feet, and they can whip that thing out and smack it, smash it. They're experts on this. And they're boys. They're trained as boys to do this. So there's a process of teaching them how to be a warrior in essence, because that's part of, their training back then. And so David was a boy, but not like you and me would think of a 14, 15-year-old boy. Back then, that was pretty much when you were getting married at 14 and 15. You were starting your family. You were in the army at the king's disposal, and you were supposed to be a warrior. So David was by himself when he was out there, but he wasn't. He was by himself physically, but he was not alone. And then when he got through that, and he gets to Goliath, well, again, he walked down there by himself, but he wasn't alone. God walked with him. Now, when you flash forward to the next three instances that I mentioned in chapter 18 and in 19 about how Saul killed him, you'll see that David didn't go by himself anymore. He had Jonathan. Him and Jonathan. He chose to bring a person, a human, on this journey with him. Like, dude, I want to be your friend. Would you be my friend, my brother? And they became brothers, and they fought together in battles, and they would practice together. And the Bible actually says that Jonathan and David were closer than a female, meaning, I know a lot of people say that means he was gay. No, it's not what it's saying. It's saying the intimacy. It's what it's trying to imply of a wife, like myself and my wife. We are so intimately connected, and it's not a sexual thing, okay? It's a physical and a spiritual level that you become intimate. And that's what he was trying to relay when that message came forward about David and Jonathan. They were they were brothers. So David said, this is kind of getting boring on my own. I'd like to have some company with me. So he did. He took him. And he took him with him on the journey. And when you read those chapter 18 through 19 and the three different spots that I'm talking about in chapter 17, you'll notice how Jonathan followed him, and they were together until Jonathan died. And then David, while Jonathan was, on the battlefield that day when he died, David was in this place called Ziklag. I'm sorry, the Caves of Adullam. And the Caves of Adullam were where you went to hide when you were outside the law. That back then they called it an outlaw. If Paul was an outlaw, what that meant was Paul broke some law, and by doing so, they deemed him outside of the law. That's how that term came about. So you're now an outlaw, which means two things. The law doesn't apply to Paul. So since the law doesn't apply to Paul, you better be careful, because anyone that's gunning for him can come and chop him up and shoot him, and they don't go away for it because he's outside the law. The law doesn't apply to Paul. And so there were over 400 strong men, which meant soldiers, and they were outlaws outside the law, including David. And David was in the Caves of Adullam, and what do you think happened? All these 400 men heard that David was there, and they went to him and said, can we serve you? Can we work with you? And he said, absolutely. So he didn't take and go by himself. After he learned the lesson from the shepherd boy to Goliath by himself, that's where he chose to say, nah, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to take people with me. And success is interesting. Success, people back when I was a young kid, it was always about me, or I. And people say there's no I in team. That's true, but there is an M and an E. So you can say there's just me and team. But that's kind of foolish. The reality is the word team spells together, everyone achieves more. That's what the acronyms are. If you spell it out, TEAM, together, everyone achieves more. So if I work with Cam, and could I start this company and do the whole thing by myself? Absolutely. I've got a track record for doing that. Why do I need to bring someone along with me? In doing so, I am going to have a partner, a person that's going side by side with me to help build something up. And it's no longer me going to the top by myself trying to figure it all out. It's me and Cam, or me and Paul, or me and TJ, or me and Jesse, or me and Cece. And so when people always tell me, oh, it's really lonely at the top, well, that sucks for them because they're idiots and they don't know how to take people along with them. And the funny part is they're not alone even when they're by themselves. Being alone and by yourself are two separate terms. Being alone is you have nothing. You are outside of the presence of God, the universe, that you are on your own. You have been just, if you will, isolated. And that only happens when we choose to do that. And I don't know about you, man, but I've been isolated. I did 4 months in the hole in prison. And I don't know if you know what the hole is like, but for 4 months, you're in a room that is approximately 4 feet across and 8 feet deep. And you have a little mattress that's about that thick. And there is a bathroom to go to the bathroom with and a little sink to wash your teeth and so on. And they feed you your tray in there. And 1 hour a day, you get out by yourself, locked up again in another isolated room that has no wall pictures, no windows to the outside. In most of the counties and most of the prisons, it's got a gated thing on the top, and that's it. It's very lonely, and it can mess with a person. But I never felt evil. I never feared it. Why? Because I was not alone. I was by myself, but I wasn't alone. And you guys have had that feeling when you're walking somewhere and you're like, yeah, I know I'm not by myself. And you can hear that ever-present voice that's telling you, that's a good decision. That's a bad decision. It's not you being alone. And that's not your brain firing off some synapse saying, oh, yeah. No, that's the universal consciousness of God telling you he's with you. And that's a beautiful thing when you think about that. Because no matter what they do to you, and that's what's interesting is on my journey in life, because I was asked, and that's why we talked about Psalms 23 a while ago, when I was asked, how do you overcome so many obstacles that you go through? It's really simple. I don't do it alone, ever. I take people with me. Next Thursday, I'm going to have my heart surgery. I think this is now the 7th heart surgery. I'm not by myself. I'm going to be in that surgical room alone without any of my family or friends. Yes, that's true. But I will not be alone. I'll just be by myself physically. But God will be with me. My family and friends will be with me spiritually. They'll be praying for me, thinking positive vibes, sending that healing vibration so that we can get this fixed and find out, hopefully, how to fix the ticker. That'd be nice. I'd like it after 7 surgeries for that to work. We'll see. But the beauty is, no matter what you do, if you're alone, that's a choice. And you don't have to be alone. God's right there with you. Just talk to him. It's a conversation, just like you and me are having any other day. Hey, how you doing? I'm good. I'm struggling. I'm battling this. Man, I sure could use some help, big guy. And all of a sudden, you feel that connection to him. And so that the thing I want you to realize is, so David, that when we first started off in that message in Psalms 23, this is focusing on specifically just verse 4. So in just verse 4, as we end today, I want to leave you with this. I want to repeat the words that I've said a few times. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. This principle is true if you're a Christian, a Jew, a Gentile, a Muslim, a Hindu, an atheist. It does not matter. Someone says, well, yeah, what if you're an atheist? You don't believe in God, so how's he walking with you? I don't care what your belief is, the deity that created it all. It's the creative consciousness is following you. It's with you. And so you're never alone. You might be just by yourself momentarily. But if you are by yourself, make sure it's not your own choice. In other words, if you think, why am I by there's people out there. I take Jesse along with me. And I succeeded. I took Jesse to this client who's a friend of mine. We took them to their house. They're clients. They're supporters of our ministry. Jesse got an offer to have a job from them when they need their big, huge, gigantic lawn. I won because me and Jesse accomplished a feat together. Jesse won because Jesse got himself a job to work when they need their huge yard mowed. It's a win-win situation. David went to the top. David was the only guy in the Bible that God said was a man after his own heart. And I think that's important to remember that, because David was a sinning SOB. That guy sinned better than all of them. And yet he would repent, he would humble himself, and he would always be like, God, show me a path. And God shows you a path when you reach out to him, to her, to the deity. So that's the message. Don't go through life alone. It's only lonely at the top if you choose it to be. And remember, fear nothing. For even though you walk through the darkest valley that you've ever walked through, it's okay. That is our message. I normally would say, hey, Cece, do you have anything extra? Hey, Cece, do you have anything extra? Doesn't sound like she's talking today.
Cece's all candy.
We love you guys. We'll see you next week.
Cece transformed into candy, guys.
Your stream will stop immediately when you're no longer live. End.